and also probably as part of our broader discussion of,
Okay.
I don't want to keep these guys waiting, but on the other hand, parking might figure into both discussions. And if we start making suggestions for parking specifically, is this the last one we do that with before we have a broader discussion? Or do we have the broader discussion and have that informed?
I think we have a broader discussion that we need to engage in, and the request for the conditional use permit is within the mixed-use district, which at this point stands on the requirements that are in the ordinance right now, so.
Our performance, the way we've been acting with requests is we've been making parking recommendations.
As
and
part
protecting-
of the conditional use,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
which we still have the ability to do.
Right, so I guess I'm bringing this up because to me it seems like an obvious situation. Without keeping them waiting, do we want to just fly by the seat of the pants on this particular one and then go into the broader discussion of parking for the town as a whole? Or what do we want to do? Just throwing that out there because I see it's coming up twice. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think their application stands on its own, and I mean, I don't think we can subject them to a conversation that we're gonna have about something that might happen. They're already, making an application under the ordinance as it stands, so I just don't think that we have the ability to, I mean, we have the ability to impose conditions, so I think that we'll address that. And I think we're gonna be talking about the other as we proceed into the agenda, so.
And it can be forward-looking, just kind of thinking about what we're going to be.
Does that seem okay? I mean,
I think that's the way it has to go. I'm just kind of pointing out that we might do one thing the last time with them, but we might have a different discussion right away. And it's just a little weird, like we're turning on a dime, but there is sort of a kind of a coming in under the wire sort of vibe to this. And, so just pointing that out.
Yep.
okay. So we'll move on, unless there's any additions or changes to the agenda, we'll accept the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Second.
Motion is made to accept the agenda as presented. All those in favor vote aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. The agenda is adopted. We have minutes from our previous meeting. Any additions or corrections, changes to that? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll move to accept them.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented,
I'll second.
and there's a second. Any discussion?
I could have swore I read something that was goofy, but if I catch it later, I'll bring it up.
Okay. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. Read off this larger sheet. Is a public hearing for a conditional use request to operate a single-unit lodging facility in the mixed-use commercial residential zone district from Jackie Heisler. This property is at 115 First Avenue West. You have information in your packet regarding the property and regarding the request. There's a aerial photo of the property showing the location, proximity to adjacent structures, and a narrative presented by the applicant. And I'll just throw it out there, I mean, obviously the issue of the parking was one that the applicant had talked to Mike about, and Mike responded back that we've been discussing that at length with our previous applications that we received, that parking is an issue that is important to us. Their suggestion that they had in the rear of the property off the alley, space for potentially up to 3 spots. And you can see on the aerial photo where that location is. I did drive through the alley and, you know, of course, this makes it look flat, which it's not. So how those 3 spaces would be accommodated in there with the slope might be a challenge, and I don't know if there's anything. I mean, first of all, John, do you have anything that you want to add to the application, or
So
any
I'm here,
comments?
I think everyone probably knows, so I'm Jackie Hodgers, she's the applicant, and I have her house listed.
Come forward. Yeah, please, come up and identify yourself.
Okay. I'm John Oberholzer, I'm a real estate agent at Timberwolf Realty, and I'm here representing Jackie Hodger, who owns the property. And she's seeking the conditional use permit, and we have a purchase agreement in place to buy it, Mike, Cascade Vacation Rentals, and they want to know that there can be a conditional use permit before they move forward. And so that's what this is about. And Jackie's not able to be here, so I'm here. And she's interested whether or not they end up buying the property to have a conditional use permit, just as part of the sales process, to be able to show it to these folks or any future buyer, hey, we have this. So whether a person wants to rent or not, that can be in place. The parking, you know, and maybe Mike can comment on it if need be, but, you know, they're considering changing the garage back there into additional, like a bedroom or something. So in their case, that would go away as a parking spot. If they didn't buy it, that would still be a parking spot for someone. It's a single car garage. It is sloped back there, but I assume with some grading and opening it up, you could park cars there. I'm not an expert at that, but. So, I mean, I think I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, John. Anything you have to add, Mike? We had any comments written or otherwise?
No,
Okay.
this neighborhood's been through this before a time or two.
Yeah, and we will open it up for public hearing and let the record show that there are no individuals here other than the applicant and the purchaser of the property.
I assume the letters went out.
It's in the newspaper.
I'd like to hear what everyone else thinks.
I
Well,
have a lot of
let's
questions.
We'll close the public hearing and,
Yeah.
officially
Yeah.
move into the planning commission discussion. So, commissioners, thoughts, comments?
I have some questions. So I see the application is dated October, what was it, 23rd? When did it come to the city? When did you receive it?
I think it was that day, but let me
Okay.
check my calendar to be sure.
My reason is, I checked my email on Friday, thinking, I've got a meeting coming up, I want to prepare.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything Friday.
No, we didn't.
And
send
I
it out.
checked on Saturday thinking, maybe it just came late and I've got work to do for this meeting and I didn't get it. I got it. I saw it at 5 o'clock Monday night. I have a life too. Monday night, I was not able to do any work. Yesterday was election day. I went to work at 8 o'clock and got home at midnight. I was not able to do any work. So today, I tried to do some work so that I can be knowledgeable. But I have a ton of questions that I was not able to do in time to be prepared for this meeting, and that frustrates me. So I would like to just suggest that if we do receive an application for a conditional use permit, you don't get the agenda done, until maybe a couple days before this meeting. But we get the application, so we can start asking questions and looking at properties and making up our minds so we can come here prepared So I'm just suggesting that because I feel rushed into this tonight.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I don't think that is necessarily part of this discussion, but I would definitely agree with that. And I responded back, I think, to you, Patrick, about on that note, wanting to have more opportunity to actually see what's going on and read it and really get it into my head so I understand what's going on. And a Friday before a Wednesday is a much better situation, but obviously that's a discussion we can have and it's not really part of this. But
I'll jump in. So, Mike, is this like a procedural thing, timing-wise, as far as, is there any policy on how far in advance this board gets a request for a CUP prior to a meeting? Is there anything like that that's codified?
Not codified, not policy-wise. Our practice has been to send it out on Friday before a
Okay.
meeting.
So that's been,
So it's
that's,
just a policy. I mean, it's not even a policy.
that's been a
It's just
historic
practice.
But
pattern.
it's what we do, understanding the issues that you're raising,
Yeah.
but in this case, it just wasn't possible, so.
And
But we
so
certainly
who's
could
the-
have taken it and sent just the small piece of it out earlier.
That would just be helpful for
Yeah,
me
you can
because
do that.
I'm the newest. I have the most to learn, I believe. And I want to do my work and not just be a rubber stamp when I get here. So I do have some questions that I would have found the answers to before, so.
So, I mean, I do think that's a reasonable request, Stacy, and I think it could easily be done that when the notice is being put together for the newspaper, that at that time, which obviously there's enough lead time for that to happen, that we would then have that application in hand also, so that, if there had been information that you wanted to gather about the request, you'd have the opportunity to do that, so.
And there's not normally a lot of other things that we would provide. There's a few things that we put together that we send with the packet, but, we don't do a lot of analysis of it for you beforehand, so.
That's what I think is my job, and I just was
Yeah,
not
so-
able to do that.
We can do that, we can send that
Okay.
out.
So,
So with that, I mean, if you have questions,
I do have
then.
some
let's
questions
go
here.
Go into that. Sure.
Yeah.
okay, so my first question is, in this mixed-use district, how many conditional use permit requests have been received over the last 3 years?
You mean specifically for lodging?
For, yes, this type of lodging.
In the mixed-use district, the entire
whole
mixed-use
district?
district?
Oh,
Yeah, I
we
don't
would
have
just
that
be.
to-
going
I
off the
think
top of our
5
head.
others.
I can think of.
And how many of these type of lodging facilities are currently operating in this district? Or a zone, whatever you call it. Do you call it a district or a zone?
Zone
Zone.
district.
It's a zone.
Okay.
It's both.
Yeah, I don't think we have that, I mean, off the top of our heads. I mean, we could probably throw some numbers out there, but they wouldn't necessarily be accurate. I mean, it's not a huge district. It doesn't,
There aren't that many. I mean,
you look at the.
Right.
There's
If you
not
look at
that
the
much
zoning
that's in
map, it's
that.
not.
It's not big, and.
No, it's a
but when-
relatively small district. I don't know if you have the map, but the mixed use is the blue.
Yeah, I have the map.
Blue
Oh,
district, so.
Actually, I printed off, and I can tell you how many homesteads and how many seasonal and how many commercial classifications are
Sure.
in this area.
But we don't license or track these types of facilities. So even to answer that question, we would have to use secondary sources.
Which gets to my, down here. Yes. Okay, so we don't know that. So then I'm reading this little document that some other group put together, and this is our guiding. So I'm reading through this, and it says, there are permitted uses, and this is a conditional use permit, and there must be a reason the committee said, we want these kind of things happening in that district. We're not so sure about these down here. And so I'm wondering, so what is the mixture of these up here in that district versus conditional use? And is that the intent? If we keep just, okay, somebody comes in, requests a conditional use permit, Yep, we'll give it to you. Well, wait a minute, there was a committee before that said, ooh, maybe we should think about that. So this is going back and forth in my head, right or wrong, I don't know. I haven't had time to process.
Well, I mean, that's probably another good question, because I think, you know, the concept of a conditional use permit, you know, when the ordinance was created and uses were created that were permitted within that district, they were generally agreed by the planning commission, city council, when that was adopted, that those uses, by their very nature, don't seem to be appropriate and fitting within that district without any other restrictions or standards or requirements being imposed on them. Conditional use in a particular district would be a use that, you know, that would be appropriate or could be appropriate based on the specific conditions that might be appropriate for that particular use or activity. And some conditional uses actually have standards in the ordinance that spell out what those requirements and circumstances might be. Others are more subjective and open to this kind of discussion. So, and when that conditional use category was created, there were no standards created to go along with that. So that's where it leaves it to the planning commission and the city council to ultimately make the decision and impose conditions that would be appropriate for the particular use that might exist, so.
Now, I wouldn't ascribe a reluctance to those things that are on the conditional use list. I don't think it was about reluctance. I think it was about just wanting to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. Because there are
Yes.
certainly, you would look at a lot like this and say, well, we wouldn't want to see a 10-unit rental structure here.
Well, yeah, because you can't.
Right. See,
You-
the
you-
types of uses that are not allowed.
You can.
You know,
It's a conditional, it's a small scale.
Oh, that's, okay.
You know,
You
even
have
if,
10
we'll
or
call it
less.
6 even, right?
Okay.
Just the idea is that you go through the process of evaluating the conditional use permit based on the questions that are on the application. And that process is all that's added. So
But-
it's not a, there's nothing about, you know, we don't like these things as much. It's more of, we just want to make sure they get a little extra scrutiny.
And I get that, but then I look at the top 6 and we think, okay, you can do that without asking anybody. So there must be more emphasis put on, this is what we kind of really want.
well, I don't think
Because we're
that-
going to make
I
it
don't think
easier
that's
for
the case,
those.
that it's, we want the permitted uses and not the conditional uses. It's that recognizing that the conditional uses probably need to have a little bit higher level of scrutiny in terms of what kind of standards you might put in place, because we're saying that the standards that the ordinance prescribes for permitted uses are basically the standards that they have to comply with, you know, setbacks or lot size requirements or height and, you know, those kind of things, where the other types of uses that are suggested by conditional use, there might be a higher level of scrutiny in terms of conditions that might be appropriate. So,
Okay, so now I do have specific questions about this project then. First of all, so the neighbor to the above is a homesteaded permanent resident. Was he contacted? Do you have any information from him that says, no problem?
Nope.
This alley back here, actually, I tried to drive it, I couldn't get through this. So I'm just wondering about access. I assume this is what you're talking about, coming down from this upper level and going to accessing the
I don't know if
property?
you'd want to come down without the city improving it.
Yeah,
But you come in from below.
I mean, I came in from below when I.
but it says private drive right there. So I went to go that way,
Well,
and it
it's
says
not one.
private,
It's
but
not.
it says it So is it public property or is it a private? I don't know, 'cause guess
Yeah.
what? I didn't have time to do my
It's a
research.
public
Public
alley.
right of way.
Public
But-
alley.
I have a question
I
about,
saw that
Have
and
it-
I didn't drive in.
I have a question about that. Does the alley take a turn and then go between, because when you come from the north down, I was able to make it, but I got a full-size truck and I thought I might not be able to make that.
Yes,
But-
there's the parking lot that's above the Arrowhead building and
Yeah, between
below.
them there?
Yeah, most of that parking is on private property. There is a 14-foot alley
That runs through it, so it's
goes
L-shaped.
through there, so it's
Okay.
L-shaped.
So I decided that's what guests will do, you know, they're gonna go through there and I just didn't wanna see a future problem. Okay, so that's fine.
Yep.
That part.
That alley is not actively maintained by the city. It's not built to a standard where we'd even attempt to maintain it. If they were going to access it in the wintertime, they'll have to make their own arrangements to plow snow in there, which I assume is already happening because they have a propane tank right there that the propane person can get to in the wintertime, so. It's certainly a solvable issue for whoever is going to operate the property.
I think if you're going to have parking back there, if the discussion goes that way, the alley's gonna need attention, because it's creepy. It's really narrow too, I think I scraped up my truck going through there.
From the top,
From the branches and things that are hanging in there.
coming down.
Yeah, from coming up from the top, yeah. What else you got there, Stacy?
So, I was confused about the garage being used for parking and then the garage being used for rental. So the rental is separate from the house? Or would you rent it all together?
It's not
One
me.
person?
So maybe we just put that to
Yeah.
Mike. But from what I understand, it would be just a single unit.
So there would be two rental properties or, no, okay.
Can I?
Oh, yeah, yes. Identify yourself too.
Yeah. Pardon me?
Come on up.
Identify yourself, come up, so, yeah.
We got two hot seats here.
I'm used to it.
Nice.
I'm Mike Larson, and I'm with Cascade Vacation Rentals. To answer your question is, we plan to convert the existing garage to a bedroom with its own plumbing. And the property will be rented as a whole. They will not be rented independent of each other, where you could rent the garage and rent the house. It will be rented as one. Just provides an additional bedroom, if you will, for an otherwise pretty small footprint of the house.
There's two bedrooms inside. One bedroom is really small. I can just take a single bed. So that was your idea, to get a little extra.
Is the garage currently insulated?
No,
So you'd have to go from pretty much just from the shell and bring
Yes.
it up. And there's no plumbing running out there currently?
no.
So you'd have a bit of dirt work and such,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
What is the square footage of the house?
I think it's 1,000.
I think it's south of 1,000 square feet, with a lot of unused or not really good use of space, in my opinion. It's a nice home, make no mistake about it. A lot of just space.
And the 1,000 square feet doesn't include the garage,
No.
so that would be an addition then, so
Yeah.
garage is
The garage is probably
Two-
10 by 16 or something.
200 square feet or
If you-
thereabouts.
Maybe it's a little bigger than that.
This is the perfect building for us to really realize the difficulty we're going to have in defining what a unit is when we go through this process. Because this space is very difficult to use to the fullest extent that the square footage might imply because of the way it's laid out. It's just a quirky layout of the building. And it's a custom designed house that one person built for themselves, and it doesn't lend itself to, putting 12 bunk beds inside of it. But another space that might have very similar square footage could potentially lend itself to that, and this is where we're going to have it's going to be tricky for us to figure out if we want to create a parking regulation. And can we really just base it on square footage, or do we have to be more nuanced than that? Because in this case, it won't fit very well.
So anything else, Stacy?
No, oh, wait. No, I guess that was my little notes. Go ahead, and if I
That's
think
fine.
of my next one.
We can come back if you think of something. Michael, anything? thoughts you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was wondering about the access too, through the alleyway. And that seemed like, but people have driven there, so I guess that is.
Oh, it was lively.
Tricky, but doable.
Anything else?
No, that was my big one.
Yeah, as Mike had pointed out, and thanks for you guys having that discussion and being sensitive to the parking, because obviously been down this road before with our parking discussions and so forth, and we're going to get more into that more deeply. One of the biggest concerns about the increased amount of vacation rentals is access to parking. And the sharing economy and the advent of vacation rentals is something that has gotten ahead of our ordinances and our codes. So we're talking about it. I'm really thankful that you discussed it, and that you brought up the fact that there is room for a couple of spaces back there. You will need a good worker, a skilled worker back there to do it. If you were just taking away a parking spot and turning it into a bedroom, that'd be a problem, I think for me. But I think my personal feeling about parking spaces from my own experience is, one bedroom of a standard sleeping situation, like 2 people, that's one parking spot that works pretty well. 2 bedrooms with maybe up to 2 people in it, that's 2 spots, that works pretty well. 3 bedrooms can still be 2 spots. Most people, when they're driving here from distant places, are not taking 3 cars. They're a group and they're finding out a way to travel together. And when I looked at that space that's in the back there, I think you'd be hard pressed to get 3 out of that, personally, 3 usable ones. But if you can make a couple of good ones, I think you'll meet most of the needs that you're going to have there. And you know way more about this than I do, Mike. You've been doing it a lot longer. And but we're in this battle now for trying to keep residential parking and nightly lodging parking. We're trying to keep it off our retail streets, so the retail streets can become for the customers and the people who are visiting. And if you can pull that off, I wouldn't have a hard time supporting this if you could assure us that you'd get that parking in there of at least 2 spaces. And the other thing is 2 other issues that I'm hearing coming up. I would want you to maybe assure the board that the entire property will be treated as a unit, or the garage will be treated as a bedroom as part of that, not as a potentially separate rentable unit. And then at some point we may want to have a discussion of what is the maximum number that we're comfortable with in this zone. Right now, that's not been a discussion that we've had. But just like what I mentioned at the very beginning, these people are petitioning for a conditional use permit, under the guidelines that we've been using. And we may adjust those guidelines, we most likely will. But right now, they're not really a part of that discussion in so much as the conditions that we can apply right now. And I want to be fair and consistent with what we've been doing too. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I think if you created 2 parking spots there, I'd feel that you're meeting the need for the property.
Okay, thanks, Todd.
Aren't you removing the garage to create one
No,
addition?
no.
You're not?
No, there's adequate space back there. Mr. Miller pointed out to grab out some stuff and put in 2 space.
Probably a retaining wall, I would think,
The
maybe
photo
2 of
with-
Yeah,
them.
we looked
Garage.
at a retaining wall.
This is the
Yeah.
garage here, and he's got this area up here.
How they would remodel the garage and make it
That would be another,
a year-round living
another bedroom
space.
space.
Be a bedroom and a half bath.
Okay.
Maybe 3/4 bath.
Like a detached master bedroom.
Yeah.
Anything else, Hal?
Right.
Well, while you're looking.
When you say conversion of the garage, what are you talking about?
The existing garage is there,
Yeah.
and it's a very nice garage, but we're gonna we're gonna insulate it, we'll plumb it, and we'll make it look like a bedroom. And it'll be heated and be year-round. And the access will be from the home back out to the master bedroom, if you will. That's,
Okay.
Anything else, Hal?
No?
Okay. I have just a question with regard to the capacity. You're saying that it's 3-bedroom. Sounds like 2 of them are reasonable-sized bedrooms, the other is not. Are you thinking of a maximum capacity for the property?
yeah, we put maximum capacities on all of our properties as we advertise them. The maximum capacity for this one by definition when licensed by the Minnesota Department of Health, would be 5. Because you have 2 in the existing home, the larger bedroom. You could have up to 2 in the garage suite, if you will. And then the 1 bedroom is the head scratcher. It's compliant for 1 person under MDH license requirements, which is 70 square feet at a minimum. And it just squeaks past that. So you can, by definition, only have 1 person in there. And it's, by the way, as I think some of you know about it, the house is pretty interesting and very nicely done. It's just odd.
Yes.
The use of space is odd. It's beautiful. It's really, but I mean, John knows, I scratched my head over that thing for a long time, trying to figure out, how does this work? And so it doesn't work in my, with our experience with 1 bedroom and 1 single person room. Just, the math doesn't work. So, now 1,000 square feet would suggest that, oh yeah, I mean, you have a lot of opportunity there. Well, there's not.
It's a lot of hallways and.
Yeah, so yes, by definition, we would put it out at 5, because you have 2, 2, and 1. Most likely, it's gonna be, 2 and 4. Is how it will rank.
So, and then with the issue of the parking, that area in back, and, I mean, I drove back in there, I didn't really think too much about the, access, I thought it was adequate, I mean, it's,
Well, it's not coming from,
I didn't come from up above and drive down, I came
Yeah.
in through the lower area, lower alley, and came up the street, just because that's the direction I was coming from. But my concern was the slope of that area that you're suggesting the parking, could be put in, and how to make sure you can accommodate parking spaces and get people in and out of there, because obviously they're going to have to pull in and back out. And
well, I was unaware that the city does not maintain the alley, which complicates matters, for sure, for us.
I think when it's as far gone as this one is, they're going to at least want to have it. I mean, this is from my experiences. I live on an alley, one of these alleys, and they're all the responsibility of us, the property owners. But every once in a while, a mystery plow goes through that none of us ordered, and I'm very thankful for that.
A snowplow or but not a grader?
those could happen from time to time, too.
That happens sometimes, but there's no promises.
Yeah.
Who's the Oz on that?
I don't
say.
know, but I should have even brought it up.
Our policy's pretty set on alleys. If you want the city to maintain it, you need to let the city build it to our standards, and you need to pay for that. So
Yeah, that's good to know.
if the neighbors want to be assessed and do a project, we can build that. It'll be a very nice alley, and
That's interesting. I mean, I understand that I may have to go back up there and take a harder look, because that, I think, would potentially pose some challenges on the parking.
Yeah, you need to be able to make that turn to get in, and
Right, and back up.
yeah.
well, people are using this alley to park on. So
Yeah.
from the bottom and from the top, there's just the one little section where people aren't using it a lot. People still.
That's also why I'm thinking 2 spaces, not 3. I don't think you have the ability to make that angled turn with 3.
This home back here only has access coming in off the alley.
Mhm.
Okay.
So behind this house,
Yeah.
there's another house, and
And
I assume they come in from the lower side.
They do.
Yeah,
And
they must.
You can see how
Yeah.
the angle
Yeah,
park in
they're
there.
angled in there, right.
I just for some reason assumed everyone would come from above. I don't know why. That was the angle that I was looking at. But
Yeah.
this would obviously be an easier turn coming from
Those
below.
folks are a vacation rental as well, right? Right behind?
Yes.
Which ones?
Well, the ones with the garage in that picture. So I think there's 2 properties here.
North Shores Narragansett LLC was your last
Yeah.
conditional
first
use.
one.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know that if there's vacation rental in that small house, is there?
What's your concern with this?
Well, I'm not having a concern, I'm just identifying the fact that their only access is via the alley.
Yeah, so that means the alley will be there.
So in order for them to get to their home, they have to come in either from up above or down below and access, and park, obviously, adjacent to their homes, so. you think of anything else?
I did, but it's more for my question.
That's
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. It is, actually, that Mike reminded me that I have a line here about licensure with the county and making sure that we're having more of these kind of projects happening. And how do we track? And the licensure with the health department. Are we as a city making sure that happens?
Nope.
So why aren't we partnering with the county? Because the county's gonna do
The
that
county
now.
just started this. It's a brand new
Yeah,
idea, if I
yeah.
recall.
We've been
Right.
involved in that conversation with them.
Yeah.
I don't
Are we-
know that there's anything to partner with yet up there.
I think
Yes,
so.
there is, I talked.
What is there?
Well, they're in the process of,
Through
it's
the
going to
process
be
of
happening.
making a
Yes,
recommendation.
it's
to-
going to happen.
Right.
It's- And I'm just like, okay, it was just a handful or whatever, but now it seems, I don't know, I don't have the numbers, how many are out there?
It's quite a
And
bit
are
more.
we,
Yeah.
should we worry? I know, if you put up a restaurant, we know you have a license and it's inspected and everything's okay. Should we think about that we know that there are smoke alarms and that
This-
that things are safe?
If I can make a
don't know.
suggestion, that's, I think, part of this discussion we should be having. I don't know if it's part of what we should be discussing
Right,
with
that's why I
them,
said it wasn't
But,
Yeah.
specific to
Yeah.
them. I'm like,
And-
just wondering about all
yeah.
of this.
And-
How do we know?
And I can give you some background. That discussion's come up before. It's always been sort of a voluntary thing for getting your health department certification.
So
and those of
you
us
don't
who-
make it a requirement for the conditional use permit? That's what I was wondering.
Me
What
on
are
the-
some of
the-
the-
me on the
ci-
planning
ci-
commission?
The
No.
city has not made it a requirement.
I don't think
that-
we've had the right to do that without a different process.
Okay.
I think that's where it came up before. We may have the right to do it, but we have to follow a certain process and make it part of the ordinance.
Well, my understanding of the last conversation the planning commission had about licensing was they weren't interested, and in particular because they didn't think we would
Well,
be equipped to do it.
And there
very
wasn't
well.
county participation at that time,
Yeah.
and you have to create a position, and you have to pay a person to do it.
And what they're
it's
talking
another-
about is just
Yeah, theirs is more basic.
maintaining a
and
list.
it's
Yeah.
They're not gonna do
Okay.
licensing per se.
Oh, interesting.
But-
I
Just wanna
haven't-
know
It-
what's out
well,
there.
Is
I
there-
know there's-
You're gonna pay a fee and you're gonna be on a list, but they're not gonna inspect your properties,
No.
as far as I
Huh.
know.
And Mike and I
guys
have
probably know more about
have
this.
been part of that conversation with the county. We sit on the vacation rental committee, and so.
Yeah,
we-
if that does move
Yep.
forward, I imagine we'll talk about, is there a role for us? Is there a partnership opportunity? Are we interested?
Yeah. And at this point, until that happens, and we're not saying we don't want to do it, it's the county's committee, and the county is making decisions about how they want to proceed with this, and if they decide to go ahead with the requirement for, I don't know if they call it permitting, I think, not licensing, because they're not,
Right, if it's a permit.
yeah, but they're just gonna, because they want to be able to maintain a list of the properties and have some information, which they have none. We don't have any either. I mean,
And it just seems like a smart idea to do it all at the same time.
well, we could piggyback on that
Yeah.
process.
To start, and then we can decide what we need more.
I don't think we were to drive that conversation. In fact, we haven't driven that conversation.
That's what I heard.
And they haven't done anything yet either. And they're gonna make a recommendation. The county board hasn't talked about this as a board, so we don't know if they're gonna do it.
All right, so I'm sorry to bring this back to their application here. If we were to make a requirement that you do put in the 2 parking spaces, the alley's obviously going to need some improvement for people to even want to use them, I think, because it would be a little hard to get in there and make that turn. And so as you're discovering, this might be an additional expense, because now you know that the city isn't going to pay for improving that alley. And so, but I don't want to just make the recommendation that you put in the 2 parking spaces and see what happens, because I would assume that if you have a dirt worker back there, and he's putting in these 2 spaces, and putting in probably 2 retaining walls, one above and one below, there's going to be some extra dirt around. And you can probably very quickly improve your stretch of alley right there, and just be done with it, because getting to it isn't that bad.
Coming up from below.
Coming from below isn't that bad. There's just that one really big dip, and that's just pouring in some material and shoving it around. and maybe clearing out the brush, and I think you're fine. So, I don't want to keep you here all night. But,
Mr.
is
Chairman?
Has everyone said what they need to say?
I'll make a motion that we approve this conditional use permit as presented.
There's been a motion made.
I would.
Is that with the caveat, the condition that they are required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would just add, how do I do that? If I were to modify that, that the garage addition is defined as a bedroom, not a separate unit? Do we need,
Yeah.
this is a weird one.
Let's, can we get a second to the motion and then have conversation about
I'll
that?
second it, and then,
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. The motion is to approve the recommend approval of the request with 2 off-street parking places. Is there discussion?
yes, and I would just add that discussion that we define the garage as a 3rd bedroom, as part of the property, not as a separate unit. So it's not, we're not creating a duplex or a 2-unit property. Is there language for this?
Well, I don't know if there's language for that, but I think we should be clear on the fact that this is a single-unit rental property.
Yeah.
And even though the motion doesn't call for that, we may want to add that as an additional condition to make sure that we're understanding this, not just us, but you and any future owner that might be subject to these conditions would understand that they can't take and separate the units off because they're segregated already. And that it's
Not our intention.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to do that in the future, they can always initiate that conversation. There'll be
Okay.
different conditions at that point.
So,
I'll call for a question.
Well, just make sure we're clear here.
I'm just wondering, do we want to, in that, make sure that we say for the maximum capacity of 5? I don't know. What if the next person decides to remodel and there's 3 bedrooms, full size,
That
plus
has to
the
go through
garage?
you.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Well, let's talk about her concern for a second. If someone wanted to now increase the beyond, well, first of all, the Minnesota Department of Health isn't going to
They aren't
be
going to
okay
know.
with this. No, they aren't going to know at this point, but they might in the future. But unfortunately, we've never placed a body count criteria on these rentals. However, owners haven't been abusing it.
I get
And,
that.
and
yes.
it's not good for business to do that. But I don't see that house as being an option for that, really, because of the way it
The
is.
licensor will stipulate the occupancy based on square footage of each room.
Explain that? The licenser?
MDH,
Okay.
when we
okay.
go to the Minnesota Department of Health, they're gonna come up and walk through the property, and they're gonna go,
Right.
that goofy little room off to the
Okay.
right there is good for 1 person, and that's for 2, and that's for 2.
You know, we know that you make sure your properties that you have under Cascade are all licensed through MDH.
Correct.
You know, if it was sold some point down the line and somebody chose not to license it, you know, MDH isn't gonna come after them.
That's why I have a concern with this, granting it to the owner that can pass it on to anybody. You know, we all know what, they do good work. Don't know. He just changes his mind on this sale, and we get the next one. We don't know.
Then,
I have a problem
yeah,
with that.
I mean, if there's a complaint, then it's dealt with through those authorities. At this time, maybe in the future, we'll have more say over that. But,
yeah, I'm just wondering about, you know, we really don't have any way of knowing how many people are going to be inside of a structure, you know, once it's
except
out
on a
there.
complaint basis. If
Right,
someone's
I mean,
saying, hey,
that's
there's
it.
a wedding reception going on here, or there's a party, and a neighbor
Right.
complains.
And so we really won't have any.
Not on an
So-
ongoing basis. There's certainly ways to investigate that. And if there was a condition placed on this permit about occupancy and an investigation revealed that it wasn't being complied with, the permit would be removed. So, I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to put in as a condition as a count. And I think it's actually kind of a useful analysis for us to go through when we're thinking about impacts to the neighborhood and parking and things like that, to ask an applicant to tell us what their intentions are. If you're comfortable with them, then make that a part of a permit.
It would be a new thing we haven't done before.
No, you haven't done that.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah,
we're
but
developing this conversation, I think
Yeah,
it's
okay.
an
Well, that's-
interesting way to go.
And I think that what this is doing is pointing out to us maybe some of the standards that if we did want to have a more thorough conversation about this, what those standards might start to look like, because right now, as you say, we just kind of
I have-
subjectively address these applications as they come in based on the property and location and.
Maybe a suggestion would be that the applicant follow Minnesota Department of Health standards. Is there any pitfalls in this? I know, Mike, you can think this through too. I know so often in vacation rentals, you'll see bunk beds because, people are trying to economize. People are trying to experience the area. They need to come here. They can't afford bringing their family of 10 and getting 5 hotel rooms or 3 hotel rooms, So that's a niche that vacation rentals fills. But also it's common to see fold-out sofas and things like this. It's not ideal, but it's very common. And so you'll see the bedrooms occupied as bedrooms and maybe a person sleeping on a fold-out sofa or a couple sleeping on a fold-out sofa. As far as I know, the NDH doesn't have a problem with that.
No, that's an egress issue, and
Yeah.
if you can provide egress in the living room,
Right.
you can throw down, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people.
Right. Right.
That's the interesting part about the NDH. I mean, you look at the rooms, and there's a simple algorithm for that. But outside, if you have egress anywhere else, you can land down.
So I'd like to
So maybe-
suggest that maybe
Okay.
we add a couple additional conditions to this motion if it's acceptable. One is to set a capacity limit, maximum capacity limit for the occupancy, and the other is to define this as a single rental unit so that, it can't be separated off and split and create two rental activities.
And, as long as it's conformance with the Minnesota Department of Health, I think the capacity is then limited by the parking, ultimately. How many people can you bring in a couple of cars? 8?
Well, I think under the current conditions of what Mike is saying, they're looking at a maximum capacity of 5. I think we should, I think that seems to be,
Are you comfortable with being limited to 5?
Well, there's so many. You're right. I mean, I talked about the 2, and the 1, because that's how the home is set up. But, but then again, you might have a 3-year-old that comes along. And there's just, kind of
And you
those
will.
cases.
can we say 5 adults then, or, I mean, it's like, I can't imagine everybody's gonna bring
You
along
can
12 kids, but.
I mean, this is nothing new to any of you. I mean, we see it all the time, right? So it could be mom, dad coming up for a month, and then all of a sudden, kids from college will come and stay for the weekend. And and we track all that, by the way, but, because we ask for how it's gonna work. Yeah, so, I don't know, I kinda liked your suggestion, based on the cars. But listen, we also have learned in our business, we don't like a lot of people,
No.
frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, less is better.
It seems to, I'm happy for how this goes. Frankly. It seems to me that if you haven't done it on other ones, like the one across the street, the one across the alley, where they asked to comply with how many people are gonna be in sleeping bags or how many people are gonna be on couches. I mean, I think I'm not gonna tell you guys what to do, but maybe that's another discussion, it's not.
Yeah,
to lay it down to this
the
one.
discussion's evolving
Yeah.
as more vacation rentals come online and more concerns
Yeah.
are in there. And, these documents that we have, they're living documents. Basically, my interpretation of what that means is they work for the time they're written. Maybe they don't work a few years later, and that's why we keep churning things over. But,
I can
So-
tell you, we will not be putting 8 or 10 people in this building. We don't want them.
Right.
And we don't really care for 8, because it just doesn't, listen, when you rent a nice home and spend some good, you want to have a pleasant experience
Yeah.
as the guest, right? And the rest, you don't want to necessarily pack them in, and we want them to have that experience,
Right.
so. It's not 10 and it's not 8, so if you're considering a max occupancy, if I can recant on my 5 and go to 6, just give us a little
you'd be okay with
flexibility.
6? You'd be okay with 6?
Yeah, we clearly be
Because I think that could happen pretty frequently. Again, a little kid or something like that, and
Yeah.
someone on the sofa.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, and if that's the last of our discussion
Hal,
on
would
conditions.
would you be willing to allow an amendment to your motion to allow the capacity to be set at 6 and to be considered as a single unit for rental purposes?
Yes.
I'll second that,
Yeah, I'll third it.
if I didn't.
Okay. So any further discussion? Hearing none, well, we should go through the
Oh, yeah.
findings. Let's see before we- Number one, the findings that have to be made in order for a conditional use permit to be granted. First is that the use conforms to the land use or comprehensive plan of the city. The zoning district, mixed-use zoning district allows this type of lodging activity as a conditional use, and with proper conditions, I think we've shown that it conforms. Second, that the use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. The existing neighborhood is a mixed-use district, commercial uses, residential uses, fairly dense pattern, but doesn't seem to be out of place with the types of use that already exist. Third is that the use would not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement in the surrounding area of uses permitted by right in the ordinance, or in the zone district. And the uses that would be allowed by right in the ordinance are residential uses and certain types of commercial uses, which already exist and obviously will continue to exist if this is or isn't granted. And four is that the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with a desirable pattern of development for the area. This area was zoned mixed use, not that long ago, in order to recognize the variation in the types of use and activity that, do exist in that area, and recognizing that it's a transition from the downtown and highway districts to the strictly residential districts that are in the next block up. Anybody have anything to add to that? If not, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve this request with the conditions as recommended, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. This is sent on to the council next week, be a council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is old business of the ordinance amendment language. And you have a copy of that ordinance amendment
Yes.
with showing the changes, questions, comments.
This is the most basic version of what you talked about at your last meeting. So there's no elaborations about other impacts like parking or the vitality issues or anything else. It's just a simple change to make any small-scale lodging a conditional use anywhere in the zone, and that hotels would still be allowed as a permitted principal use. And I just also included then the general requirements for motels and hotels, so you could see what that means when somebody builds one of those. There's actually a fairly substantial set of regulations that we apply when somebody wants to build more than 10 units. So I didn't see the need to add any additional regulations for the permitted principal use of large scale, if that's the way you want to see, because we've already got quite a few, including a parking requirement and setback requirements and other things that don't exist for other uses there. If you also wanted to do any of that for lodging in the conditional use list, that's not included here, and we could talk about that.
Yeah, and I think when you take a look at the large-scale lodging that's, shown here as permitted use. Important to refer to the standards in the ordinance that are very specific for these types of uses. I don't know if you have a copy of the ordinance, but there's minimum lot size, density requirements, setbacks, lot width, lot height. There are parking requirements that are included. Requires one off-street parking space for each room or unit, plus additional space for non-resident employees, additional space for if they have restaurants or bars in conjunction with the lodging activity, and loading space for structures that are over a certain square footage. So there are a lot of requirements that come into play with regard to large-scale lodging. And when we get to the small-scale lodging, we kind of get to where we've just kind of gone around with this last request, is that gets to be pretty subjective in terms of how we address that. And I mean, personally, I think it would be appropriate, since most of the this kind of performance standard type language is part of the original ordinance that was created in 1971. A lot of the terminology and the application, and some of it still fits, but some of it clearly is not quite in sync with our current thinking, and we have to be a little bit careful about just making a change that incorporates these standards or doesn't incorporate standards, and recognize what that means. I don't have a problem of approving this ordinance amendment. What I have an issue with is that, you know, we aren't creating any standards for the conditional use requirement, and I think that would be helpful, and it would probably circumvent the length of our discussions for every one of these applications, because then you put the burden on the applicant to come in with the information in hand, rather than us asking the questions of the applicant, or Mike kind of posing, well, you're probably going to get asked these questions because that's what historically has been done with the, you know, planning commission's review of these. So I don't, anybody else have thoughts on this?
I'm wondering, is it possible that we have maybe a retreat where we aren't by the clock having this kind of discussion and the back and forth? I just feel like I want to talk to you guys more with knowledge and questions, and let's hash it out. And I always feel like we're rushed and I ask too many questions. So
Will
I'm
there probably be
wondering.
donuts
I don't want
at
to
this
give you the
retreat?
impression that you're being rushed, because I think we want to make sure that
And
we have
that's what I want.
questions.
This is a big deal, and I agree with you that we seem to be just little bits and pieces.
Actually, unfortunately, tonight you are rushed.
I know,
Yeah,
and that's why when I didn't get my email, I thought, oh, they've canceled the meeting because there's an important one at 6.
Well, this is
So-
less important. It's
No.
just, and there's
I get
actually
it.
a meeting
No,
right
it's
now.
fine.
I mean, I think we have
But
time
I
to
would-
talk about this,
I
but
would
I think
like
it's
to
the way it's
have a
gonna
bigger
be.
discussion.
And I think that's appropriate, Stacy, because I think what you know, I'm gathering from our conversations over the last couple months is that, and even conversations that I've had with other city council members who have, you know, talked about the ordinance and it needing to be redone and kind of modernized. A lot of this stuff that's old, you know, still works. Some of it doesn't work so well if we had to apply it. And granted, we haven't had to apply a lot of it, but, you know, I think it might be the time to look at how the whole ordinance works in its entirety, not taking one segment of it and, you know, separating it, but, you know, when you talk about all the uses and activities and the districts and their expectations, you know, we have a new comprehensive plan, and, you know, that should be a guide and basis for, you know, our decision-making, where, you know, these rules didn't know anything about that plan,
Right.
you know, so I think you're right in that we need to spend some time talking about this, not in a situation where we have a public hearing and, you know, applicants before us and we have other business to do. But and it may be that we set aside time to have a workshop meeting that allows us to have these conversations in a more open
Yeah.
way and come away with some structure to what we think we, you know, want to see happen. So, I don't know if anybody else has it.
I think the urgency that is behind this was because of the pressure of vacation rentals happening on the main street levels. Now, we do have in our ordinance that is a conditional use permit process. I agree with Tim about having a more detailed discussion about these particular governing rules regarding hotels, because I think there's some things in there that aren't addressing what we're also looking to do, like setbacks on the front. I'm seeing side yard setbacks, but I'm not seeing front setbacks, or, you know, my concern is I don't want to look in people's bedrooms when I'm walking down the street, and I don't want to black out too much of the streets when there could be residential, so, or what, a commercial.
Well, and these standards apply to any large-scale lodging, you know, within the Highway
In
61
any zone,
district or
yeah.
the service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be somewhere, not in the
Yeah.
downtown area,
And I'm
but
sure there's a lot of wisdom that's gone before us on how to do these, and that's probably where this came from. These were probably peeled out of some boilerplate book in 1971 and
Yeah.
dropped on our town.
I'd be surprised if most of our hotels comply with these,
Right.
to be honest.
Yeah, Wild West, Wild North.
Yeah.
But do we feel we've adequately addressed the urgency of the situation, that we have the time to now go into this in detail? I mean, we do have this stopgap now of a conditional use permit meeting, but we may have to, if there's something that's come along that we think it could be very similar to tonight, where you have an individual petitioner and a sale on the table, and we haven't finished our discussion over here yet, because we want to be thorough. But we don't want to, you know, that's why I dropped the moratorium bomb so many months ago, just to let you know, this is kind of how these things can be done. Do we really want to go about it that way? You know, I wanted to ring the warning bell. And so are we comfortable, you know, are we willing to take a stand in a conditional use permit application going forward from here? Where we say, you know what, this one goes right into what we're talking about, and we're not comfortable approving this yet? I mean, is that where we're at, or do we still have to treat petitioners coming forward? So that's the only thing I would address here. Have we adequately addressed the urgency of the situation? Now we want to go forward and make it right.
And I would peel back some of what Tim talked about, just to backfill also some expectations about what that might look like. If you just think about one issue, lodging downtown, and we want to have a workshop or a few workshops where we talk about that and try to add some reasoning and regulations behind it and set some standards that we can just use going forward, that's going to take a few months. It's going to take a few dozen hours of staff time. It's going to take some money. It's going to take a lot of effort to involve the public. That's one issue in one little section of the zoning ordinance. To turn that into, we want to look at the whole thing, is going to take years, and it's going to take tens of thousands, six figures of dollars, and it's going to take lots of meetings with the public, and, you know, to just start over is a significant endeavor, and we better be sure we really don't like what we've got if we want to go that direction, or that we just have an idea about how we want it to be, and it's not that. I would advocate for the strategy that we've been using, which is, as we perceive an issue with regulations, they don't fit what we want, they're not working the way we'd like, we just take one at a time and keep working on it. Even at this effort, we're not equipped to do this at the speed you want to do. So, I mean, I think you probably noticed that. You know, you have 0 staff people. There's 3 of us in here, but none of us are planners that work for the planning department for the city of Grand Marais. We all have lots of other things. And that, I brought that up the last meeting too, that, okay, if we're gonna deal with parking and we just wanna talk about that as an issue, we probably need to bring in a little bit of help. If we're gonna deal with housing, that's a huge issue. We absolutely have to bring in a lot of help. If we wanna keep doing this, like, there's a lot of issues, that's what the city council is saying, that's what you're thinking as well, that's what you're hearing from the community. Maybe we should just bring in some help permanently to work on this.
But what do we do with requests in the meantime?
I mean, you're doing it right now. You just keep dealing with them as the situation exists.
So these two choices, you know,
But-
bring,
But I'm wondering, what do we do when we know that we've got something in the hopper that is going to affect this application that comes before us? Is it legitimate for us to go ahead and apply these future plans that we have, or these future rules that we're thinking about? Is
or
that
just to say,
legitimate?
or just to say not approved until we've sorted out the conversation. I know that's happened in the past where legally there's footing for rejecting things without precedent because you're in the middle of a discussion about this very thing.
Yeah, you're not governed by precedent. You have a lot of leeway to make decisions inside of this framework that you're given. You certainly have the legal right to add conditions to this that you didn't add to other people's. By definition, these are all done on a case-by-case basis. And they're all done on what our current understanding of what our comprehensive plan says and what our current desires are for the neighborhoods and development patterns. So,
Okay.
you have a lot
Yeah,
of leeway to
and I
So then-
don't want to be thought that I think that our zoning ordinance is broken. I don't think it's broken. I think it's very functional.
I think it's under pressure from one
There's
specific use.
some modernization that needs to occur, and
Yeah.
we've been dealing with that.
Yeah.
We've been talking about a couple of issues that we think have been relevant that weren't even talked about
Sure.
20 years ago. So by incorporating that information and dealing with those, we've kind of headed off some of the most pressing, points that have been made. But the fact is that it is a 1971 ordinance for the most part that.
But I would, put forward that, I think we are doing it the right way. I mean, I think, as things bubble up and they come to the fore, that's when we work with them, and I think that that's appropriate. If something is, it may not be perfect, it's old and rusty, but it's still working. I don't
Maybe
know.
we can do it a two-part path. One is where we pursue a more comprehensive discussion that hopefully doesn't break the bank. I don't want to spend a lot of money on this. I don't want to spend six figures on it. I don't think it's that broken, personally, comprehensively, but don't know. The other path would be, maybe we should, as we've done this, as we've picked out individual things like you've suggested and focused on them, I think we could pick on parking in the downtown core zone. The reason being, not everyone can just build a vacation rental just anywhere anymore. They have to have the parking, and it's not easily accomplished. And so, and my point is, but it has to be done, because if you have cars parked for days or weeks at a time on our commercial streets, we've got a problem. And so, the immediate pressure that we've been dealing with is what I call kind of the cannibalization of the existing bricks and mortar that we have, turning things that were once one use into vacation rentals and doing it on the main ground, main floor. And so we've kind of addressed that with the conditional use permit process. But we've also got other floors, and these people, if those are not regulated by us at this time, then those people will need places to park. And we have not placed any requirements on anyone about where they can park. So maybe we can do a specific discussion about parking in the short term, and also foster a broader discussion if there's other things we want to fix or talk about.
And I would agree with that, and that feels a little bit smaller than housing, but it does feel like when the community is talking, we're hearing them talking about housing.
Mhm.
That seems to be like a big fire that's out there, and people really want us, well, as a community, to take action on that.
Mhm.
So, if we're weighing these in a balance, that might be a little bit heavier.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it also seems like parking might be simpler, I don't know.
Vacation rental on that side of the highway.
Or not, I don't know.
Well, it'll absolutely be simpler, but I think what you're hitting on is if we keep doing the simpler ones, we're never going to get to the
Yeah.
important one. And that prioritization is really critical, because the only option is you do this and you don't do that, or you add more resources. And adding more resources is not I don't think that's a realistic
I don't think it's a popular idea right now.
goal, but then expectations have to be set around that too. It can't be
Right.
all the things that come up and these three big things. You know, the last time we did a significant reworking of this ordinance was this zone here, this mixed-use zone, when we took this, what was the C1 zone, and split it up into three different zones. That was about $40,000 and about a year's worth of work, and it was a city priority at the time. So there weren't other big projects going on that, you know, were competing for that resource. There are now. So to contemplate, I think that looking at housing, that's probably of a similar scale to that project that we did 10 years ago, do that section rewrite. And it needs to be prioritized, which means other things aren't going to get done if we want it to happen.
But there are some things I think that we can do that, you know, short of going through that major effort in terms of looking at the lot size requirements and density requirements, some of those standards of the ordinance that could be tweaked to reflect more current thinking in terms of those issues, which wouldn't necessarily take you know, a major rewrite of the residential zone districts, which,
Right.
you know, something we might be able to address, you know, similar to what we've done with the vacation rentals or the lodging issue and the downtown area and the parking issue, so.
Yeah,
And
to-
then the parking issue we can keep addressing within, you know, the permits that we,
Well, I would still, I still agree with what you said earlier about giving people standards up front.
Sure.
You know, because otherwise, rules come and go, and one person gets favorable treatment because they know everybody, and they bring 20 people into the room, and one person doesn't. And, but to deal, you know, I don't think we need to weight housing and parking as one or the other. We were initially tasked with this by the downtown business community because retail was threatened, a critical mass of retail activity. And so that is, there's not a lot of people living downtown. Are there any?
Well,
Can I
I
comment
don't know
on
if there's
that?
any.
You know,
Probably not anymore.
Anymore, I don't know if there are any
No,
more.
there
anymore.
were.
And so housing isn't impacted by what we're talking about downtown. That's that side of the highway. And so I'm thinking, I would really want to advocate for us talking about parking this side of the highway and how it relates to the creation of any lodgings here. You know, because right now we have nothing. I mean, we have these parameters. Does it talk about parking for large-scale hotels here? It
Yeah.
talks about
Yeah,
how
it
much open
does.
space, but does it talk about the number of spaces?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
breezed through that.
It does.
But I think we can find a standard here that works for the small scale stuff. And I know we gotta wrap this up here, tonight. But I would really,
So there's the parking requirements specifically stated for any large-scale lodging.
okay. So it's
Hotel,
one off street,
motels as
one off street for each, okay, that's pretty detailed. I think something like this language could be a guiding language for the creation of,
we need to go with the conditional use.
yes, yeah, if we start maybe adding some performance standards like we're talking about for the conditional use permit.
So how many rooms or units were in the one that you talked about today? Because this says, one off-street parking for each room or unit shall be required. How many are
Because we
there?
define that as one.
Yeah, I think, no,
We
that's.
called
that-
it one unit, and
No,
we
no,
said
no,
there's
no,
three
we
rooms.
call it one unit
One
for the
unit,
sake of
three
not
rooms.
subdividing, but subdivision would require additional permissions. But I really believe that we need to be realistic about parking, which is how many cars is this gonna need? That comes down to how many bodies you have, and that comes down to how many you can sleep. And so it really comes down to more of a bedroom and sleeping count. And I think it's pretty simple. I think, in my mind, it's settled. 1 parking space for 1 bedroom, 2 for 2 bedrooms, 2 for 3, but after that, you gotta add more parking spaces, so maybe it's 3 for 4, 4 for 5, and after that, you're not small scale anymore, you become something else, and then maybe you need special permissions down a certain bedroom, and I think you're done.
So in order to kind of move this conversation along, we have this, this ordinance in front of us with specific recommendations to make a change to the ordinance. We've also had this conversation about, you know, the possibility of a need for creating standards for the small-scale lodging, which obviously isn't going to happen tonight.
No.
You know, we're not ready to do that, nor are we ready to create parking standards in the downtown district tonight. But I think that those are issues that I think are going to confront us. I mean, continually.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, I still think the issue of the residential districts and the requirements that the current ordinance has that, you know, create challenges to
Yeah.
affordability. I think we need to take a look at that. But I think that's for a workshop, another time, because
Well,
all
You're gonna
we
have
can do is.
you're gonna have a public hearing, and we can get to this through the public hearing a lot. We can sit here all night long and go back and forth, but we gotta decide, do we wanna put it out for a public hearing or not?
I'd say no.
We
by
asked
the way.
Mike Roth in their minutes to come back with something, and here it is.
Yeah, but I'm sensing that maybe, based on what Todd was saying, maybe the urgency's not here, and based on what Stacy's saying, there's a real desire to dig into this on an analytical or ability to discuss level before we start talking about what changes we want to make.
Yeah,
Maybe that's more important.
I'm
next
saying there
step.
is urgency, but it's not for the big, broad discussion. Our urgency was to solve what was brought before us, which was to protect a critical mass of
Which you
retail
did.
in the core zone. Have we? I'm not sure if we have, because I'm still concerned about
Totally.
parking.
Okay, well,
Totally.
maybe,
Yeah,
We're-
and
maybe I didn't get that.
We're
right.
getting there. So I guess what I would say, we need to wrap this up, right? You've got this, you need this room? Okay,
And we
so.
have
um,
one more item on the agenda, too.
Oh, geez, okay.
It's a super easy
I'm
one.
going to suggest, may I make a suggestion, and how do I do this? I need help.
Well,
That we talk at the
what the
next meeting
suggestion
about
is.
having a specific, I want to make this, how do I do this? Make a specific recommendation that we discuss specifically parking for any small-scale lodging uses in the core zone. Parking standards,
Parking for small-scale lodging?
yeah, in the core zone. And then I think the urgency is, I think we're
The
protecting.
downtown.
In the downtown, yeah,
Waterfront,
core zone, yeah.
okay.
But couldn't we just make it a performance standard?
Yeah, and it could actually be a performance standard. It doesn't just have to be down here. It can be anywhere where there's a lodging.
Suggest we go that direction. and create a
Okay, yeah, I
performance
just was spitting out words
Is it
there.
possible for, if you have ideas and specifics you're thinking of, to send them, compile them, and send them out so we all come prepared?
Ask him if that's,
I'd love that.
okay, all right,
I
yeah.
would prefer that, so that you give me your idea and I have time to think, and process. This is not a good environment for me to.
It's high
think
pressure.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
I would suggest we all, if you have ideas, let's put a deadline on it. Get them to Mike by this date, and then you don't, just compile them. You don't have to edit them. Send them on.
Yeah,
So we all have something to
I
think
have my
about.
ideas ready. You can have them tomorrow, you know.
I won't be here tomorrow. I'll be down at MnDOT's office tomorrow.
So I think with
I'm
regard to
excited.
the issue of the performance
excited.
standards for small-scale lodging, you know, my guess is that there's probably other ordinances out there that, you know, we can probably tap into and get some information about how other communities have dealt with small-scale lodging. And maybe it's not so easy to find, but
What, we already did, so we can just go back and show you what we showed you the last time we talked about this, was only a few months ago. And it
Are you
was,
saying we're goldfish? Is that?
it was pretty hard to find. It's surprising how few communities have done a decent job of this, particularly when you try to find comparable situations, as it's difficult to do for a town like this, where we've got some similarities to places, and you name a place what you think we're similar to, it's probably 10 to 20 times our population, and not isolated like we are, 2 hours from the next significant town. So we did try to come up with some comparables, and we did look at parking when we did that, and I don't think that a lot of them dealt with it in a way that I think you would be satisfied with. So, although trying to get some advice from outside is good, I think there's something that you're seeking right now based on your experience here that we should try to define too. What's the problem you're perceiving, and what would it look like if it wasn't a problem, and how do we then write that down?
I think we're on to something. Can we discuss, get our suggestions to Mike? You can recirculate them back to us, and then see you at the next meeting. And how do we get this on the next meeting agenda? What's our process?
well, it's not a public hearing, it's up for our discussion.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's just,
We can just say it.
Michael just
Yeah.
put it on the agenda, so.
So discussing what performance standards for the conditional use permit process for
Parking and
vacation rentals.
performance standards, which
Parking
would be part.
parking
part-
number
part-
one,
Part
and
of,
then-
part of the performance standards.
There's others?
Yeah, I just want to get one done, and then we can have them all there. I don't care.
Well, if nobody sends me any others, I'm not sure what we're gonna do with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nobody sends you any other
Performance standards.
Standards?
Yeah.
Well, so
How
what are
about
we
that?
gonna
Is that a
do?
motion? Do I need to make a
So-
motion
so-
for that?
No, I think this is we're gonna continue this discussion to next meeting. We're not taking any action on the ordinance recommendation or proposal in front of us. So this will be brought back to our next meeting with additional information that will address or talk about parking and potential other performance standards.
Well, do you want a motion to table this until we
I don't think
can?
we need a motion to table. I think, not an official action that we're taking here anyway, so.
Okay.
I think we're good. So with that, we have one other item on the agenda, and that is the issue of the Creechville rezoning. You recall that the single lot that we had rezoned in Creechville a couple meetings back, and were recommended for rezoning. The city council, when they saw that too, said, well, wow, that seems kind of unusual that that would be kind of sitting out there by itself and be in a district that doesn't fit the uses up there, so it was suggested that this be brought back to the planning commission for consideration, and what it is basically that area on the map that's shown in blue falls within the community recreation zone district. It's right now used for all either residential or other types of accessory type uses, has nothing to do with the community recreation district. It's just happened that when that line was drawn, it went along the section line, and that, I think we recognized that when we recommended the rezoning of this small
Yeah.
parcel before, so.
Well, with a nod of your head that you want to do this, is just cleaning up old business.
Yeah.
So
What we will do is, and haven't done this yet, contact all these property owners first thing, and just let them know what's going on. And then we've got a little work to do getting legal descriptions, because none of these have a plat attached to them. I mean, you saw there was a page and a half for just that one lot in the middle, so it's a little.
I'm just a little confused as to why this was kicked back to us. What was the?
These are not zoned residential. One person came in, asked for theirs to be zoned residential. This isn't kicked back to you. My understanding is you asked me to do this. This is your
Yeah.
proposal.
And the council also said, yes, take care of this, because this obviously is, an issue that these other owners are gonna be confronted with at some point down the line.
Yeah.
So, with that, the planning commission, was just asking Mike to follow through and bring it back to a future meeting when it's ready to be advertised. It would be an application that is initiated by the planning commission, not by any of the particular owners out there, because they
So,
very likely don't even know.
The approval that we gave on that particular lot is still in place? Or?
It's
Yeah,
done.
You can see it.
So that,
Right.
that
It's
lot-
rezoned.
that
That's the one
lot
that's
was-
notched out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, all right.
So, having no other business, we are adjourned.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
Another
All right.
fine